I recently ran an experiment to see if Donald and Goofy could beat the first Kingdom Hearts game while Sora just sits back and plays support, and it was a success, kinda. Now during the run, I did have a rule that Sora could activate defensive magic to help mitigate some of the chaos that Donald and Goofy were enduring, which really meant there was a lot of me just popping arrow and running into Heartless to take advantage of that loophole. But I wanted to abandon those cheap tactics this time around and see if Donald and Goofy could synthesize the ultimate weapon without Sora intervening too much, or ideally without him intervening at all. Technically, I will be intervening pretty much the whole time because I'll be utilizing the command feature by pressing the top face button on the controller to tell them where to go and who to attack. But as far as the fighting is concerned, that's all up to the duck and the goofster. So, in the first Kingdom Hearts game, there are 33 different items that the Moogles can synthesize, which are split up into 6 different groups, in which each new group of items will unlock after you synthesize every item in the previous group. So before we even unlock the recipe to synth the ultimate weapon, we got to complete every other group first, which if you've crafted the ultimate Kingdom Hearts 1, you know it takes a whole lot of grinding to synthesize those 30 required items. But this is more of a is it possible video and not a hey let's do it video, so I will be utilizing KSX's 100% drop rate mod to cut out some of the monotony. Okay, so 99% of the items just simply drop from the various Heartless in the game without really any special circumstances, so you may be questioning what the actual point of this video is if most of the items needed for synthesizing are just RNG related drops. And well, it's that 1% of items that needs further investigating. So let's take a look at the first group of items to see if there are any roadblocks. Group 1 consists of the Mega Potion, Cottage, Energy Bangle, Power Chain, Magic Armlet, and the XP Earring. All of the drops related to the Mega Potion all the way down to the Magic Armlet only require the different types of shards that are dropped from Heartless throughout the game, with the most grindy of them being the Mithril Shard, since it only has a 1% drop rate from the Pot Spider and the Barrel Spider, if you haven't modified your game of course. So Donald and Goofy shouldn't have too much trouble gathering those components for further synthesizing. But the first choke point for this experiment is the XP Earring. All 5 of its necessary components for synthesizing cannot be obtained without Sora's intervention. The first of these is the Power Stone, which is gathered from the Sniper Wilds in Traverse Town. And usually in order to get that 35% chance at one dropping, you need to defeat 6 of them while staying undetected, which sounds like a big ask for Donald and Goofy to do alone, but also sounds somewhat achievable on paper. Unfortunately, this game doesn't even allow them to defeat one Sniper Wild without requiring a final hit from Sora. This mechanic was rampant throughout the full playthrough experiment that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, which if you're interested in that, the link for it is in the description. And while you're looking down there, go ahead and leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Anyway, I wish I could give you a technical reason as to why the Sniper Wilds follow this mechanic, but that's far from my expertise, so I can only speculate. But I'd put my money on Sora being the only character that can trigger an event in these kinds of situations. For example, it seems that Donald and Goofy don't actually get detected by the Sniper Wilds, so the Heartless is still technically in its undetected state, as long as Sora isn't too close obviously. And since more Sniper Wilds spawn in undetected after Sora defeats one undetected, there's got to be a flag somewhere in the code that prevents Donald and Goofy from triggering those undetected Sniper Wilds from spawning in. Again, I am not an expert, this is just me putting on my speculation hat, and also saying the word undetected a bunch. This mechanic is going to make a few more appearances during this investigation, so I'm just going to refer to it as the flag mechanic from here on out. And funnily enough, it pops up immediately with the next component required for the XP Earring, and that's the Fury Stone, which is dropped by the Giga Shadows in Wonderland. Donald and Goofy don't have any trouble clearing the waves of normie shadows that infest the Bazaar Room before their giant counterparts show up, and they can even hold their own against the Giga Shadows, but they lack the facilities to get rid of that last sliver of health. Next up on the list is the Serenity Power component from the Pink Agaricus. Now at first this seems more luck dependent more than anything because the duo only needs to get 40 hits in on the big mushroom to get a 10% chance of the Serenity Power to drop, and a good use of Goofy Tornado can rack up a good amount of hits, but the duo won't even lay a hand on that giant mushroom. And then there's also the problem of actually getting the Pink Agaricus to spawn in. So in the Deep Jungle's treehouse there are 3 white mushrooms that'll replace the normal Heartless in the area, which indicate that you have a chance to hunt for the synthesis component, and each one of these mushrooms need to be frozen in time using stop magic for the Pink Agaricus to spawn in. But as with Goofy's Tornado, there's not a way to force Donald to use stop magic on the mushroom, so the fungi win this one. That brings us to the Mithril Stone that drops from the Pot Scorpion, and this is similar to the Pink Agaricus's Serenity Power in the sense that Donald and Goofy will never be able to see the Pot Scorpion without intervention from Sora, because they will not break any of the pots at the palace gates in Agrabah, and unfortunately the Pot Scorpion doesn't spawn in without breaking at least one pot. And the final choke point for the XP earring is dark matter, which can be obtained in a few different ways, but Donald and Goofy need Sora to hold their hands to perform each of those various methods. It can be received as a reward for doing things like collecting all the fruit in the Jungle Slider course, it can pop out of nowhere when activating Trinities, or it can just be hiding inside of locked chests. The one thing that all these methods have in common is Sora, obviously, but he's not the star of the show for this run. Now, there is another method to get dark matter, but we'll touch on that in a bit. So, to close out group 1, there's only 71% of the available components that Donald and Goofy can grind for without Sora stepping in and saving the day. So already before we leave the first group of synth items, we kind of already answered the question of can they do it, but let's keep going for funsies. Group 2 has another 6 items that can be synthesized, those being the Mega Ether, Guard Earring, Angel Bangle, Golem Chain, Room Armlet, and Moogle Badge. Right off the bat with the Mega Ether, we encounter another kink in the chain, and this time it's the Mithril, which is primarily found in chests, but as previously stated, they can't be opened by Sora's companions. But as with dark matter, there is another method to obtain Mithril, so again, we'll touch on that later. The Guard Earring, Angel Bangle, Golem Chain, and Room Armlet are all normal drops, so no issues there. However, the very last item in group 2 is another dream killer, as every single required component except for one is impossible for Goofy and Donald to obtain. Starting from the top, we have the Blazing Stone, which is obtained from everyone's favorite rare spawn, the Chimera. This Heartless is another enemy that suffers from the flag mechanic that can't be triggered by Donald and Goofy, which is just a second phase after its main health bar is depleted. But Sora has to volley back the skulls that fly out of its head to deal damage during that second phase health bar, and for what it's worth, I couldn't even get Donald and Goofy to play ball with the skulls, so it's another thing that even if they could trigger the second phase, it still wouldn't matter. Next is the Frost Stone, which is gifted by the Grand Ghost. This is an interesting enemy because instead of attacking it with physical damage or magic, you attack it with the healing items from your inventory, and unfortunately, Donald and Goofy aren't generous enough to give enemies items. The Lightning Stone from the Black Ballad is the next component that has a flag in some sort of manner. So instead of the real Ballad letting the duo do some damage to it after identifying it during its follow the leader game, it just negates all damage, which means it'll never drop the Lightning Stone for Donald and Goofy specifically. And the last impossible component for the Moogle Badge is Mithril, which we already know why it's unobtainable thanks to the Mega Ether at the beginning of this group of synth items. So out of the 6 components needed for the Moogle Badge, 5 are impossible to achieve without the help of Sora, and since the Mithril is needed for 2 separate recipes, that means Donald and Goofy can only grind for 74% of the components in group 2. So if you're keeping track at home, it's not looking too good for the Disney duo. But moving on to group 3, there's the AP Up, Dark Ring, Master Earring, Gaia Bangle, Titan Chain, and Synthable Mithril. So after taking a look at the AP Up, there's only one component that causes trouble, and that's its personal Mithril. But hey, Donald and Goofy should be able to synthesize Mithril now, right? Well, yes, but it's not the easiest thing for them to grind for. Mithril needs 3 components in order to be synthesized, and unfortunately there's very little Donald and Goofy can do about one of them, which is the Mystery Goo. Mystery Goo has 3 different ways it can be obtained, and they're all related to the mushrooms. The white mushrooms hold various items depending on the pose they perform, and then the right magic has to be used on them in order to get the specific drop. And technically Donald could use the right magic on the right mushroom to get a 10% chance from the Mystery Goo. It would just be annoying. But this isn't about what's annoying, it's about what's possible. The Rare Truffle is another way to get the Mystery Goo, but this involves playing hacky sack with its body and getting at least 10 hits on it before it itself hits the ground. Now, this definitely isn't impossible for the duo to accomplish, but it's way more improbable than the white mushroom method. Lastly is the black fungus method, which I'm going to throw a big fat maybe on, because in order for the black fungus to have a chance to leak its goo, it needs to be defeated with a critical hit. And as I previously stated, I have virtually no knowledge of the technical aspects of the game, so I'm not entirely sure if DNG can even land critical hits. I did try for about 15 minutes and let them wail on some of the fungi, and nothing was happening, but that doesn't mean it's impossible, so I think a maybe is appropriate here. Hey, rep from the future. So I did more testing and I did witness a black fungus drop Mystery Goo after Donald and Goofy defeated a few, so that maybe is a definite yes now. But back to the Mithril recipe. I think that the white mushroom method is definitely viable, but again, it'll be super annoying because not only does Donald have to cast the right magic on the right mushroom, he also has to do it before Goofy shows up and starts pummeling the damn thing. But it's definitely possible, and that's all we need to say that we can synthesize Mithril. So for group 3, we know AP Up and Mithril are good based on the recent findings, and Dark Ring is also also good because it just requires normal drops. But the Master Earring, Gaia Bangle, and the Titan Chain are the run killers in this group because they require drops from the Giga Shadows, Black Ballad, and Sniper Wild respectively. That means Donald and Goofy can only gather 50% of the required components in this group. Now for group 4, which lumps together the Elixir, Defense Up, Heart Guard, 3 Stars, Atlas Armlet, and Crystal Crown. When going down the list, everything looks real good and you kind of get your hopes up and think maybe they can gather all the ingredients for this group, but then you see that the Atlas Armlet has a Dark Matter and the Crystal Crown has a Blazing Stone and a Frost Stone, courtesy of the Chimera and the Grand Ghost. So shout out to the Flag Mechanic and Generosity for killing this one. But on the bright side, Donald and Goofy can obtain a whopping 88% of the necessary components for this group, so that's pretty cool. But moving on to group 5, this is where things get a little more interesting because the first synthable item is Dark Matter, which so far has caused a few issues with the other groups. Luckily, the components for Dark Matter are easily obtainable, minus the Mystery Group for Mithril, but we already covered that. So just know that from here on out, DNG won't run into any Dark Matter related problems. So along with that item, the Mega Elixir Power Up and XP Bracelet are full of easy drops or purchasable components, which means the Cosmic Arts and the Ribbon are the only problem children here, and it's because they require drops from the Pot Scorpion and the Pink Agaricus respectively. Sorry, another correction here. The Jet Balloon and Neo Shadow follow the Fly Mechanic too, so the XP Bracelet actually isn't craftable by Donald and Goofy. So this group has a pretty high Donald and Goofy gather rate of 92%. But now it's time to look at the very last group of items, which consists of Donald's Fantasista weapon, Goofy's 7 Elements weapon, and Sora's Ultima weapon. So let's finally take a look at what the Ultima weapons ingredients have in store for DNG. Thunder Gem. Okay, those drop from Screwdivers and Aqua Tanks. Easy enough. Mystery Goo. Annoying but possible. Dark Matter. Easy peasy. And Serenity Power. We were almost there, but the Pink Agaricus had to show up and ruin the fun again. Which means, unfortunately, even if you ignore the failure from the other groups, Donald and Goofy cannot synthesize the Ultima weapon. Alright, let's wrap this up. Out of the 30 items that need to be synthesized to even unlock the Ultima recipe, Donald and Goofy can successfully synthesize 20 without Sora intervening at all, so they can only handle about 66% of the items. But real quick, let's take a look at Donald and Goofy's premier synth items and see if they can even gather the material for their own weapons. And they can't. Fantasista requires drops from the Giga Shadows, Sniper Wilds, and Pot Scorpion, and 7 Elements require drops from the Chimera, Grand Ghost, and Black Ballad. So now we know that they can't even synthesize their own weapons, let alone the Ultima weapon. But that's all I have for you today. So if you made it this far, I gotta assume you liked the video, so don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and go ahead and click on the video that's on the screen right now.